Wow, that's really a hard question. I mean, I knew him since I was 19, you know, and I hang out a lot with Charlie, who was like one of my sort of close friends. And Charlie and I had a lot of interests outside of just playing a band, you know.
When Charlie Watts, the steady heartbeat of the Rolling Stones, passed away in 2021, the world expected his bandmates to be front and center at his funeral. But instead, fans were stunned to discover that Mick Jagger, Keith Richards, and Ronnie Wood were nowhere in sight. Why would the Stones skip the farewell of a man who had been their foundation for nearly 6 decades? The truth isn't what most people think, and the real story behind their absence reveals a side of the band, and of Charlie himself, that few have ever understood. The shock of his passing. News of Charlie Watts' death hit like a thunderclap across the music world. For nearly 60 years, he wasn't just the drummer of the Rolling Stones. He was their anchor, the man whose quiet precision kept the chaos of rock and roll in balance. While Jagger commanded the stage and Richards fueled the band's rebellious edge, Charlie was the calm force in the background, steady and unshakable. On August 24th, 2021, that balance was shattered. At 80 years old, Charlie passed away in a London hospital, surrounded by his family. Tributes poured in immediately. Paul McCartney called him a rock-solid drummer. Ringo Starr remembered him as a beautiful human being, and countless musicians from Elton John to Questlove honored his influence. Even rival bands paused to recognize that rock had lost one of its true gentlemen. But as fans mourned, one question spread like wildfire. Where were the Rolling Stones? Why weren't Mick, Keith, or Ronnie standing beside the casket of their brother in music? For many, it felt unthinkable that they would miss it. And yet, their absence wasn't neglect. It was part of a much bigger and more complicated story. Hidden struggles. For all of Charlie's quiet dignity, his life wasn't untouched by struggle. Behind the polished suits and calm demeanor was a man who had faced storms that nearly broke him. In the 1980s, during one of the Stones' most turbulent eras, Charlie slipped into a dangerous spiral. While the band's public image was defined by wild excess, most people never imagined that their most disciplined member would also fall victim to it. Yet he did, battling alcohol and drug use in silence. Friends later revealed that Charlie's struggles nearly cost him his marriage to Shirley, the woman he'd loved since his teenage years. At one point, the foundation of his carefully built world seemed ready to collapse. But unlike many rock stars who embraced chaos, Charlie made a choice. He sought help, pulled himself out of the darkness, and rebuilt his life with the same precision he brought to every drumbeat. This battle, fought quietly, without headlines or scandal, revealed just how human he really was. Fans saw him as untouchable, a man immune to the destructive cliches of rock and roll. But in truth, Charlie had walked dangerously close to the edge, only to step back with a resolve that stunned those closest to him. And this wasn't the only time he faced down life's harshest tests. Years later, a far more frightening battle would put both his career and his life in jeopardy. Health battles. By the early 2000s, Charlie Watts had already proven himself a survivor. But in 2004, he faced a threat that no amount of discipline or self-control could hold back. Doctors diagnosed him with throat cancer, and for the first time, the man who had seemed like the unshakable backbone of the Stones was forced to confront his own mortality. The news stunned fans and shook the band to its core. The Rolling Stones were in the middle of planning another massive tour, but instead of focusing on rehearsals, Charlie found himself undergoing intensive treatment. For months, the music stopped, and the future of the Stones hung in the balance. Yet in true Charlie fashion, he fought back with quiet determination. Against the odds, he entered remission, and by 2005, he was back behind the drum kit for the band's A Bigger Bang tour. To outsiders, it was nothing short of remarkable. Just a year after battling cancer, he was performing stadium shows night after night, never missing a beat. But while Charlie returned to the spotlight, those close to him knew how much strength it took to keep going. The illness had left its mark, and although he rarely spoke about it, it became clear that he was no longer invincible. Still, his resilience inspired both the band and fans alike, a reminder that he was more than just a drummer. He was a fighter. That spirit carried him through the years that followed. But in 2021, another health scare would change everything, and this time, the outcome would be far more devastating. The final days. In 2021, the Rolling Stones were gearing up for yet another massive North American tour, proof that even in their late 70s, the band had no intention of slowing down. But behind the scenes, Charlie's health was quietly slipping. He underwent what was described as a successful medical procedure, and at first, fans were reassured it was nothing serious. Charlie himself, ever private, gave no dramatic statements. He simply stepped aside, saying he didn't want to drag the band down by performing when he wasn't at full strength. For the first time in nearly 6 decades, another drummer was brought in to fill his place, Steve Jordan, a longtime friend of the band. The announcement shocked fans. The idea of the Stones without Charlie Watts seemed almost impossible. Still, most believed it was only temporary, that Charlie would recover and reclaim his spot as the heartbeat of the band. But just weeks later, the unthinkable happened. On August 24th, 2021, Charlie passed away in London at the age of 80. His death wasn't just a loss for the Stones, it marked the end of an era. The man who had been with them since the beginning, who had survived the chaos of fame, addiction, and illness, was suddenly gone. For fans, the grief was immediate. But in the days that followed, the mourning turned into confusion. Rumors spread online, whispers about the funeral arrangements, and one question echoed louder than the rest. Why weren't the Rolling Stones there to say goodbye? The funeral mystery. When the day of Charlie Watts' funeral arrived, fans and journalists expected a somber reunion of rock's most enduring band. After all, Mick, Keith, and Ronnie had shared the stage with Charlie for nearly 60 years. They weren't just bandmates. They were brothers in music, bound together through fame, fortune, and endless tours. But when the funeral took place in Devon, England, something strange happened. The Rolling Stones were nowhere to be seen. No Mick Jagger, no Keith Richards, no Ronnie Wood. The absence was glaring, and it left fans stunned. How could they not show up for the man who had been their anchor from the very beginning? Rumors exploded almost immediately. Some speculated there had been a bitter falling out, that Charlie's quiet nature had left him more distant from the band than anyone realized. Others wondered if the Stones had been too busy preparing for their US tour to stop and grieve properly. On social media, the criticism was harsh, with some calling it a betrayal. But the truth was far more complicated. Reports later revealed that the funeral had been deliberately small and intensely private. Charlie, who had always shunned the spotlight, didn't want a spectacle. His family honored his wishes, keeping the service intimate, something he would have preferred over a star-studded farewell. In fact, according to those close to him, Charlie may not have wanted the Stones there at all, at least not in a way that would turn the ceremony into a media circus. Still, the mystery of their absence cast a long shadow, raising uncomfortable questions about loyalty, grief, and the private bonds behind one of the world's most public bands. And as the Stones prepared to go back on tour, their decision only fueled more speculation. The truth behind their absence. The real story behind the Stones' absence at Charlie's funeral wasn't coldness or neglect. It was a perfect storm of timing, logistics, and respect for Charlie's wishes. At the time of his passing, the band was deep in Boston, locked into final rehearsals for their long-delayed no-filter US tour. This wasn't a casual run-through. It was a massive operation, with hundreds of crew members, complex lighting, pyro, and video production schedules that couldn't simply pause. Traveling to England during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic added another layer of complication. Strict quarantine rules meant that Mick, Keith, or Ronnie would have faced weeks in isolation both in the UK and upon returning to the US. Any deviation risked not only delaying the tour, but endangering the health and safety of the band and crew. At that point, canceling was not a simple option. It would have created ripple effects impacting hundreds of livelihoods and disappointed fans who had been waiting years for the rescheduled tour. Beyond logistics, there was a more personal reason: Charlie's unwavering desire for privacy. Those closest to him insisted he would have hated a spectacle. His funeral was deliberately low-key, attended only by family and a few close friends, reflecting the man he had been off stage: understated, meticulous, and fiercely private. The Stones understood this, choosing to honor him in ways that matched his character rather than forcing a public performance of grief. And so, while the world assumed absence, the band found quiet, meaningful ways to pay tribute. Every night of the tour featured a video montage of Charlie behind his drum kit. Their iconic tongue and lips logo was rendered in black and white, and social media posts from Jagger and Richards offered poignant, understated homage. In their silence, they weren't ignoring Charlie. They were honoring him exactly as he would have wanted, respecting Charlie's wishes. Even though the Stones couldn't attend the funeral, they found ways to celebrate Charlie that were deeply personal and true to his character. Every night of the No Filter tour, before the first note was played, a moving tribute video filled the stadium screens. Fans saw Charlie behind his drum kit, captured in archival footage that highlighted both his precision and his quiet humor, the very essence of the man who had been the band's heartbeat for decades. Subtle gestures extended beyond the stage. The iconic tongue and lips logo, usually bursting with color, was transformed into black and white, a silent but powerful symbol of mourning. Social media became another canvas for remembrance. Mick Jagger shared images of Charlie smiling warmly. Keith Richards posted a photo of his drum kit with a simple, closed sign, and Ronnie Wood spoke openly about their bond, describing their years together as a brotherhood forged in music and loyalty. Every tribute reflected the understated elegance that defined Charlie's life. There were no grand speeches or extravagant displays, only thoughtful gestures that spoke volumes. In choosing these quiet ways to honor him, the Stones weren't just respecting his wishes. They were teaching fans a powerful lesson about how to grieve with dignity, love, and subtlety. Even as the world watched and speculated, it became clear that Charlie Watts had shaped not only the sound of the Rolling Stones, but also the way they said goodbye, in a manner befitting the man himself. How they paid tribute. Beyond the private gestures and tour tributes, the world found countless ways to celebrate Charlie Watts' life and legacy. The Rolling Stones' official website became a digital shrine. For 10 days, every page was replaced with a single black and white photo of Charlie, a quiet, powerful acknowledgement of his presence and influence. No words, no navigation, just him, reminding fans of the man behind the drums. Musicians from every corner of the industry also paid homage. From Paul McCartney and Ringo Starr to Elton John, Brian Wilson, and members of contemporary bands like Liam Gallagher's Circle, tributes poured in, all recognizing not just his extraordinary skill, but the humility and grace that defined him. Even newer artists, like Jason Isbell and Brittany Spencer, dedicated live performances to his memory, showing how far-reaching his influence was beyond the Stones' catalog. Social media became a space for remembrance as well. Mick Jagger posted archival images of Charlie paired with the Stones' music. Keith Richards shared simple, yet evocative images of his drum kit, and fans worldwide flooded comments with personal stories of how Charlie's rhythm and style had shaped their own experiences with music. These gestures weren't grandiose. They didn't need to be. Each one reflected the quiet strength and elegance that defined Charlie Watts. Even in death, he remained a guiding force for the band, for fans, and for the world of rock. A reminder that true greatness often resides in understated consistency, skill, and a deep respect for life lived fully yet privately. The man behind the music. Charlie Watts wasn't just the heartbeat of the Rolling Stones. He was a man of depth, taste, and quiet passions that few ever saw. Offstage, he built a life defined by family, art, and personal fulfillment. Married to Shirley and Shepard for 57 years, their relationship was a rare constant amid the whirlwind of rock and roll. Shirley's steady presence grounded Charlie, providing him a sanctuary away from the chaos of fame. Together, they raised a daughter, Serafina, and cherished their granddaughter, Charlotte, maintaining a close-knit family life that contrasted sharply with the band's public persona. Charlie's love for the arts extended far beyond music. He was an accomplished visual artist, contributing graphics, comic strips, and stage design concepts to the Stones' image. From the lotus-shaped stage of the 1975 tour to the elaborate productions of Steel Wheels and A Bigger Bang, his creativity shaped some of the most iconic live performances in rock history. Nature and animals were another source of solace. On his North Devon estate, he ran an Arabian horse stud farm, immersing himself in the care and breeding of horses with the same patience and precision he brought to drumming. Cricket, a lifelong passion, connected him to tradition and discipline, while rare first editions of books and carefully curated collections reflected a refined personal taste that few outside his inner circle ever glimpsed. Even his approach to everyday life was uniquely his own. Charlie never drove a car, preferring to admire them as works of art rather than instruments of transport. In all things, he balanced the extremes of fame with the serenity of private fulfillment, showing the world that a life in rock could be lived with dignity, creativity, and quiet joy. Through it all, Charlie Watts left a legacy that extended far beyond his impeccable drumming. He showed that greatness is not only measured in talent, but in loyalty, humility, and the ability to stay true to oneself, a lesson as enduring as the music he helped create. Legacy and reflection. Charlie Watts' story is one of contrasts. The quiet man behind the roar of rock, the steady heartbeat beneath decades of chaos, the private figure whose influence shaped the public spectacle. From his disciplined drumming to his artistic vision, his passion for family, and his love of nature, Charlie built a life that balanced fame with serenity, proving that greatness is often as much about character as it is about talent. Even in death, his presence resonates. The Rolling Stones honored him in ways that reflected his values, while fans and fellow musicians around the world paid tribute to the humility, grace, and precision that defined him. His drumming, his art, his private pursuits, and the love he shared with his family form a legacy that will endure for generations. Charlie Watts didn't just play music. He lived it with dignity, creativity, and unwavering integrity. And while the world may remember the beats, the tours, and the albums, those who truly knew him remember something deeper. A man who quietly mastered the art of balance, proving that a life lived with purpose, loyalty, and passion leaves an echo far louder than any stage. In the end, Charlie Watts wasn't just the heartbeat of the Rolling Stones. He was a reminder that even in the brightest spotlight, it's possible to live a life defined by grace, humility, and enduring love.